Welcome to God and Autobiography, the podcast. I'm Scott Langdon, creative director and host of the program. And once every 5 episodes, I get to co-host a series with Jerry Martin. We call it What's on Our Mind. In What's on Our Mind, Jerry and I draw out themes from the previous 4 episodes and explore them a bit more deeply as they pertain to our own day-to-day spiritual lives. This week, Jerry and I talk about God's explanation to Jerry about what it means to be a person and how God comes to Jerry as a person. We also explore how the person of God shows up to each one of us, especially during times of suffering and grief. I tell the story of how God was present to me all during this past month of June, and in particular after I received the news that my dear friend Vince had passed away. This time I get to spend with Jerry is time I'm extremely grateful for. Our conversations mean a great deal to me, and this one in particular, because it was so personal. Here's what's on our mind. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome back, everyone, to our 47th edition of What's on Our Mind. I'm Scott Langdon. Jerry, it's great to see you today.
Well, good to see you, Scott. And 47th, well, that's quite a bit.
That's quite a number of them, huh?
Yeah, that's quite a number.
Creeping up on 50, but round numbers, who needs them? 47 is great.
Yes, that's right.
This week we are looking at Unit 47, and in that unit of episodes, we started with From God to Jerry to You. Then we had, as usual, a Jerry and Abigail intimate dialogue. The Radically Personal, it was our 8th episode in that 9-episode limited series, and we're getting ready to do episode 9. I'm very excited about that one. That whole series, Jerry, has been just terrific. And for our spiritual story in this unit, John Thetominal was a really wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed working on that, and it's not quite out as the recording of this, but it will drop soon. Focusing on this unit, Jerry, 2 main points came to my mind, and I'd like to talk about them both in this episode. But I want to break them down into these 2 main points that God really gives you with such insistence. It's something that's very important for him in his dialogues with you. It seems like that it's very important to God that you understand this, that we all kind of get this idea. The first thing is, God is coming to you. He's telling you, Jerry, I come to you as a person. And if I come to you as a person, that means I'm a person. But he also says, I'm much more than a person, which means that there's an aspect of God that has become present to you in this manner. And God is showing up as a person. And more deeply, he even says the personal is interpersonal. That it's not just subject-object. There's something that coalesces the relationship of I, thou, me, and you. There's a coalescence that is also God. So there's an aspect of God that's a person. Now, can you explain a little bit more about why you felt God thought that was such an important thing for us to know and understand?
Yeah, it's God wanted me to tell his story, God's story. I say his, but don't pay attention to gender here. Wanted me to tell God's story. And it seemed to me strange. God has a story? We always think of God as a sort of abstract being, timeless and out of time, in eternity, in some rarefied space. But God is saying, no, I have a story. I am a person. Persons have stories, right? That's almost what it is to be a person. You wouldn't have quite made it if you didn't have a story. If you would just have momentary intermittent consciousness, that would be a terrible state, and it would be something short of being a full person. You might lapse into that under some extreme health circumstances. But God is a person, and the line you quoted was important. The personal is interpersonal, because God's story is a story in interaction with us. And God is living with our stories, with our lives. God cares about us. I think if you ask why this is important, well, we say things like, God so loved the world that, blah, blah, blah. God loves the world. When you read some of the high theologians that make God kind of impersonal, then they have to interpret that very metaphorically or analogically or something. They have to drain the concept of love out of the picture. And one famous one, I think it was Anselm. It feels to us like love. It's not love. It feels to us like love. Well, I'd be very disappointed if Abigail, instead of loving me, produced a situation where I wasn't actually loved, but I felt as if I was. That just sounds like a fraud. No,
Yeah,
that's just
yeah,
a
yeah.
fraud. So these are very fundamental aspects. The personal nature of God, the interpersonal nature of God, the relational aspect of God, and the fact that there's also more. There are other dimensions. There are transpersonal, you might call them, dimensions. And these are all the most crucial building blocks, you might say, the elements, the major features of a spiritual reality and our reality and the reality of the cosmos.
I think your response to God initially when he asks you to tell his story is very telling, and something that I telling for at least Western Christianity, and I relate to it and thought it immediately as well. Your response was, hasn't your story already been told? Because if you were to ask me before I met you and before we got into this work, do I think that God is a person, is a personal God? What I would have been arguing against is the insistence that God is a person. All of my life, I was told that, thought that, and it was personified in movies with, say, George Burns playing God, the person of God, or Morgan Freeman as the person of God. And so the idea of God as a person was not new to me, but it was something I rejected because, and we talked about this before, if you're a person, that means that you could leave. And there's a place where God could be that I am not, and vice versa, where we could be separated. And if we were separated, if God were in heaven and I'm here, what is that space in between us? What is that? How do we account for it? This, and I used to think that was a literal thing, God as a person. It's not, it's literal. You're taking it too literally. I feel like upon reflection and study and time with you, and quite frankly, time with God, that we don't go literal enough.
Exactly.
What does it mean to be a person? Another thing, when God says there is something that's what it's like to be God. Well, that's what is it like to be a person? It's not just something that's separate. It's there, and person to person, the interpersonal of a relationship is a connectivity. So the idea that you thought God's story was already told, and we could even widen that beyond, the Judeo-Christian perspective. So there's all of these religions that tell stories about God. So doesn't that do the trick? Hasn't your story already been told? And the idea that God would have a more personal story, a deeper look, take a look more deeply into the person of God, is essentially what he's asking you. Because if I want to tell a story of someone like my friend Vince, who passed away, if I were to tell his story, I wouldn't just tell you about the times that we spent together. I would tell you about a more deep essence of this. I wouldn't be able to have all the words to really communicate who Vince was, what he meant to me, what our relationship was. It's beyond words. So that sense of personhood and relationship and interpersonal, to say God is a person, I don't know that we've dug far enough in
Yeah,
sometimes.
I think that's an awfully good point because this treating all this language as metaphorical or analogical just drains the blood out of it, drains the
Yes.
life out of it. Well, of
Mm-hmm.
course, God isn't a person in the sense of walking around on two legs, and so where we see, a statue that's supposed to be a statue of some divinity, and they're standing there like on two legs. Well, we think that's not adequate. But uh, as you pointed out in discussion, Scott, with any of us, there's a kind of literal presence. I'm here, you're here, God is here. Uh, but there's also a kind of deep understanding. I write in Radically Personal about empathy, this remarkable trait we have. We can plumb the depths of each other. In fact, we can tell often at a glance that the other person is unhappy or suffering or happy or whatever is going on with them. Your friend shows up on the front door, and one look, I could tell within seconds when my daughter would call me on the phone how she was doing. She didn't have to tell me. I could tell. And we have this extraordinary capacity to enter into the depths of each other. And at one point I was told, I think this will be in an upcoming From God to Jerry, that the moment God said to me, I want you to come into the heart of God. And what? This at this point just made no sense. I thought, well, whatever it is, I'll just kind of try to let myself be swept up into the heart of God. But it sounded scary, like the heart of the hurricane, because God seemed like a very powerful, center of force. And there, and we'll talk about it, no doubt, more later. I asked God, it seems scary, like out of body travel or something. And I asked God,
Right.
okay, be with me in this and show me your love. And God said, let Abigail love you. You'll feel my love through her.
Mm.
And that's kind of part of what we're talking about. Your friend Vince. Okay, God is right there with you. God is here with Vince. God is here with the two of you in the interaction, because God also is relational, a relational being, let's say. Well, we are relational beings. We just shrivel up and die if you take everybody away, all of our supports. The babies die if they're not touched enough, or they get sick or something. Uh, so anyway, this is the actual reality that we are submerged in. And we see the reflections of it just in our ordinary interpersonal relations, friendships, relations to loved ones. But you think a little more and you pay attention and you start noticing and feeling there is a divine presence here as well. That when we speak to each other in a loving, kind, supportive way, or maybe a chastising way, who knows? But it may be the voice, that God is also. That's God's way. Abigail always says God can't mail a letter. Well, God can't say I love you either. And we do that to one another.
When I think about relationship with God and how God might come to me, as you mentioned, friends or loved ones, my wife, a call, quote, out of the blue from somebody, or, and if you look around, I found that if I look around, I already have at hand everything I already need to go through whatever it is I need to go through. I have realized and understand deeply now that the point is not to get to a place where there's not going to be any more suffering and everything is just a la la land and it's all great. You've arrived. Woohoo. Actually, I'm not really interested in that, because the times that are the most meaningful to me are when I am able to recognize that everything is here to serve me. Everything out there that's I encounter is God serving me and being there for me. I mean, you hear people use language. I've used this language too, like, oh, the whole world is against me and everything is against me and they're trying to screw me and they're trying to. You can think of the world that way. You certainly can. So why can't you think of it completely the opposite? I've been trying that. That everything that comes at me is God for me. Now, let me explain a little bit about what I think that might mean. On the 20th of June, so Saturday a week, we're recording this on July 3rd, and I'm here in Gettysburg, staying here where I'm doing a play, a musical called Come From Away about 9/11 and some events that surrounded that the few days after that. And I'm at the Totem Pole Playhouse. And I'm staying in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And I've been here since June 2nd. Actually, I got in here the 1st on Monday. The day before, on Sunday, I had closed 1776. It was a big, big hit, and I had a wonderful experience. But I just packed up the car the next day and had to come out here to a place I'd never been before with people, the majority of whom I'd never even seen or met before, to do a really important piece that's very difficult to do, that I had to learn. We all learned from scratch and we all had to put it together. And in 17 days, we're open. So much stress. And the first week I was, I don't know. What do I do? I'm kind of started to feel the symptoms of the depression and those kinds of things. And I realized that it was because I was tired and stressed and in a place and when I realized that, what I was noticing that was God was letting me know, this is what happens when you get this way, tired, in a place you don't know, uncomfortable with new people. It's okay. We know that. Let's take some time, breathe in, breathe out, get it together. And what is your role here? Not what character are you playing, but what is Scott's role in this company? Who am I, a mentor to the younger ones? Am I? I mean, I don't know. And then it was just show up and do your job. Just do your job well. Just do the best you can. You've been doing this a long time. Just show up and do your work. Whatever happens, whoever sees you I'll take care of that. I felt like that was God saying that. Like, it's all right. It's okay. Do your job well. So then we started to really bond, and everybody has just been fantastic. And the show is beautiful and it's brilliant. And then on the 20th of June, my friend Vince passes away. Oh. And I find out about this the next day, which is Father's Day, which has been a complicated day for me for several years, but it's getting much, much better. And on that day, I heard from my daughter. I heard from my son. I called my own father, and everything was, and then I found out my dear friend Vince passed away. And to make a long story a little shorter, there are beautiful mountains here, and I would drive up and down the mountains, and I found myself not angry with God for taking him too young and screw cancer, and I didn't feel any of that. I felt like in some way, well, I was just sad, I was just sad. And I started to have memories of Vince and stuff, but also just this feeling of, it's okay, it's okay. And that night I came to where I'm staying here in the seminary, and I sat down and I wrote about 600 words or so for Facebook, on my Facebook page, about Vince. And that process of sitting down and writing, and it was very similar to what I've talked about making this podcast, where when I sit down to edit, and especially the first 44 episodes, when I felt like, is this it? Is that not? And get the feeling of, yeah, this is it. Is it perfect? No, but the combination of God and me working with it, when it's done, because the intention is there to have something to release, and yeah, this is it. And that's how it felt, working it out.
not just memories of Vince, but I felt this aspect of Vince, this personal but not physical aspect of Vince with me. And I talked about him, and I wrote the essay. I structured it, beginning, middle, end. I knew what I was writing, as in God can't mail a letter, right? I was writing, but it didn't feel like, oh, I hope people will like this and think I'm a good writer. It just was like, this is the truth that I can deal with right now. This is my perspective, my story. And this is part of my story. And Vince is part of my story right now. And it felt like in creating this thing that God and I were working with Vince, that we were all together. And that post that I made about Vince, I didn't use any hashtags. I didn't tag anyone, blah, blah, blah. It's gotten over 7,500 views. For somebody who gets if I get 500, I'm like, ooh, look at me, I'm viral. But somehow, and I had a lot of comments on it, and people, memories are here and there. That to me was what Vince is all about. And so there was this moment of, it doesn't mean there's not grief. It doesn't mean there's not sadness. And, oh, you can do this to get over your grief. Top 3 ways to get over your grief. Like, I'm not interested in that. But working with it, God was completely 100% present there.
Oh, that's remarkable. I read that. It is a remarkably well written. But the point of the well-writtenness isn't, oh, what a good writer Scott is. I mean, this wasn't for a commercial purpose or anything like that. Not writing for a magazine. But the point of it being, the purpose of it being well-written is, it struck me as a wonderful sort of tribute to your friend. It brought, if you bring characters to life on stage, well, Vince is a real guy, and you kind of brought him to life. You gave, through your eyes, gave us all that same sense of intimacy with a great guy named Vince. We, of course, knew nothing about until you told us. But and grief is not a bad thing. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity in one way to feel your love for someone, right? You might occasionally, it happens, someone slightly distant dies and you're surprised to find you're grieving so much. And that's a tribute to the fact you cared and loved them more than you realized. So that, oh, I really, really miss them now. And that God is present in all that. You know, it's almost as if God is the electricity, that lights turns on the lights and stuff, that we're the instrument and we have our own power, our own motive power. But somehow to actually love, to feel deep regret, to feel longing, to be aspirational, these things have a kind of divine aspect to them. And often in a very personal way, that God is, in some sense, God is ever present and so forth. But it's also true that sometimes you feel really close to God, and really you are the instrument, is almost as if you were a pen in God's hands, of writing something, or, a vocal cord in God's service and speaking, I've had this experience once in life of speaking to a group and where I felt God is speaking through me. And the friend I have, who's the most spiritually discerning, Macon Bozick, heard the talk afterwards. She came up without my saying it. And she said, oh, you weren't just speaking for God, you were speaking from God. Well, that happens too. And it happens, I guess I was thinking of these contexts where you're speaking publicly, but I think you're right, Scott, to think about it in terms of talking to your friend, to people you love or care about, and even in the remembrance of them, has this extraordinary trait, because we don't know where people are once they've passed away. you're kind of bringing them into the world again through your own relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be an important part of the afterlife, for all I know.
Mm-hmm.
People still hold you in their hearts, and they bring you back to them, to the world of the living.
And it's interesting that there is a particularity and a specificity to persons, because how many 8 billion people on the planet right now? Um, so many that I'll never ever see. Many, many, many who just go by or pass them in cars. Many who are in a Walmart that I'm in, and we just like their background, and yet Vince, and yet my wife, and yet it's like God showing up in just the right place at the right time, always. I heard a beautiful saying. I can't remember who said it first or how I got it, but just the idea that, and I'll butcher it maybe, won't I? But do you know how you can know that you are in exactly the right place at the right time? Because that's where you are. Everything else is a story about what it could have been or should have been, but here you are. And that idea was so it just permeated my almost my whole time here, because I would start to say things like after Vince passed away, especially like I should be in Oklahoma, I should be there at the funeral, and I should have been there, I should have I should be home now, I should. But the reality is, here is where I am. And when I just took that in and I really opened up to what was around me, doing this show, this specific production of this show in this specific place, being housed in this specific area, the very people who are working on this show with me, the audiences who have come to see, this is where I'm supposed to be. And when I just gave into that, not really gave in, but just relaxed into that, it didn't mean that I stopped being sad about my friend. But it was like Vince came to me in part and said, in a sense, "Hey, it's fine. It's good. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing," which is, I feel, what he would have said in life. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know we had that kind of relationship. And so it doesn't mean it's gone because his body isn't here. That sense of you're doing what you should be doing, that I always got from Vince, is still here in this present moment as I grieve the idea that I won't physically see him again. But he is ever present with me, as he has always ever been present with me. And when I open that up to everyone that I've ever encountered, even the smallest, "Hey, what did you cut me off on the side of the road?" That person, that manifestation of God came into my consciousness to teach me something, to protect me from a left-hand turn that I would have smashed into something if I hadn't given, you know what I mean? We talk about coincidence, but it's all an offering, I feel.
It might have been there. I mean, a lot of these negative encounters with people teach you something, not in the sense of saving you from a accident,
Hmm.
but they teach you to be nicer.
Yeah, exactly. How
You
do I
know,
show up
you
to
don't have
them?
to. People often ask,
Hmm.
how did my God experience affect me personally? And
Yeah.
what always comes to mind, Abigail has a different and profounder answer, but what comes to my mind always is I'm nicer in traffic now.
I
It just
I feel the same.
my ego moves down a notch. I don't
Yeah.
have to be the first one there.
Hmm.
Let them come in front of me. That's fine. Uh,
Hmm.
and but that's just, I suppose, a kind of daily experience that is typical of how attitudinal change can occur from a richer experience of divine presence and divine relationship, but also just if you start paying more attention to your actual experience, what are you doing? And some of it is the harmful aspects that you're noting of woulda, shoulda, whatever. Uh, well, you spend your life that way, you're not paying attention to what you ought to be doing, which is putting one foot in front of the other in the situation you're in. And that I don't take it that means every situation is exactly perfect, but every situation is the situation you're in.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
your opportunity to do something worthwhile, and it's also your opportunity to learn something. And you learn a lot from the negative experiences. From the passing events, you've learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Vince is fine. It's never the departed who's suffering, it's the people left behind. And that's totally understandable, just as a good friend had moved to Nigeria or something, you were never going to see them again, that
Mm-hmm.
you would feel this enormous loss, even though maybe this is a great thing for them. Uh, but so anyway, the main job of life is to keep on keeping on and pay attention to um, what should you be doing in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said half of life is just showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably more than half. It may be 90%, is just showing up
Yeah, yeah,
and doing what's obviously your duty and not
yeah.
doing the horrible things, getting waylaid uh, and not saying, oh, I can get some drugs and zonk out and so forth and show up on stage zonked out.
Mm-hmm.
No, you gotta show up and not do these bad things,
Mm-hmm.
much like driving, keep your car in the center of your lane and
Mm-hmm.
not be
Yeah,
zigzagging.
yeah.
And that's the story of life. And God is just right there with you and trying to keep you in the lane, hoping you stay in the lane, and giving you, as I say often, is a kind of divine energy
Mm-hmm.
that God provides so that you can meet challenges and take in lessons.
Mm-hmm.
If you're block God out, you tend to not even take in the lessons somebody's teaching you by saying, "Hey, back off." You've strayed into my lane, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but God helps you take that in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This metaphor, it is a metaphor, and I understand it. It's so crucial to me, though, because I feel like it's how God has reached in and worked with me, is the idea of an actor playing a role. But
Sure.
my language is, it's the scene you're in. Play the scene that you're in, which is every present moment. And one of the ways this came up in my life recently is that, again, I closed this wonderful production of 1776, which was probably the most monumental production of my career. And I loved playing the role of John Dickinson with these fantastic actors, and the crew and the audiences were loving it. And we were selling so well, and it was in Philadelphia, all that stuff. And after we closed, we had a little time at a restaurant after, and bye everybody. And then the next day I'm off to a new job. And the first week of rehearsal, it's so stressful. And part of me is, I wish I were still in 1776. I wish I were still playing John Dickinson. And part of the waking up, is God saying, play the play you're in. It's come from away now. They need Scott Langdon to show up and do Scott Langdon's work. And if you take a meta step back on that, and you think about God saying, there's work to be done in your life. It's not, well, I wish I were over here and I wish I were doing that, or I wish Vince were still here and I wish I could have been in Oklahoma for the funeral. All of the wishes and shouldas and shoulds, I'm not playing the scene I'm in. and I'm not available to the other quote unquote characters who might need me. Maybe somebody is suffering and needs me to show up, but I'm thinking, which is different than I understand. You have to take time for yourself to heal and take time to grieve. I'm not saying, oh, just get over your grief by any means. At the same time, it can be important, therapeutic, beneficial. I don't know what, but it's your own journey. I know this is mine. It was beneficial to show up for work and play the play that I'm in.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful. I mean, that's not just a metaphor there. You are in a play.
Yeah, literally.
Is the play you're in is the play you're in. But for all of us, it's also a useful kind of extended analogy. Uh, you might be in a relationship and you think, oh, I I'm in this relationship with Susan, but I really miss Sally. But you need to be in the relationship you're in, not think, oh, that other one was better, or oh, here's somebody else who's cute, you know. And you get married, you're really in a play, made a commitment, and you have kids, and they're often trouble, they're often wayward, or you don't get along with them, or whatever. But that's the play you're in. You become a parent, and so now that's the play you're in. And so you've got to play that part. And part of it is people often talk about social relations as roles. That's a guy named Irving Goffman wrote a great book on using, in fact, theatrical language in talking about social relations. But you're in the role of a father. You're in the role of a son. You're in the role of a husband, and in the role of a citizen and a neighbor, and so on. And each one of those has the things they carry with them. And of course, those aren't just generic, but it's situation to situation. And you get in conflict with your neighbors, or they have a sudden need, and you think, oh, gee, I should really be helping them. I should run over. And I remember driving a woman who was having some health thing, and I barely knew her. She was in the next apartment over, clearly in trouble. And so I called 911, or whatever you called back then. This was when I was in grad school, and rode in the ambulance with her to the hospital. She did not survive. Relatives came by. I didn't know them, but I was the person they talked to because there was nobody else, it seems. And so those things just come your way, and they are part of the play you're in. These things that come your way, and you have to say, well, am I called to do something here? And sometimes you feel a divine push to, hey, I know this is inconvenient, but you really need to step up here. And so you do it. Hopefully you do it. If you don't, you might regret it and think, well, you're not always up to everything. That's fine. You understand that too. So you don't want second order regrets, just the regret of being imperfect, but you just try to do the right thing and hope that you succeed.
When I said that everything is here to serve me, I think about that in the sense that I am the hero of my story, right?
Yes.
As we all are. So if I think about it from my perspective, everything is here to guide me, and the bad things, the suffering, all of it is here for me.
Yeah.
Now, if that means that everybody who comes into you, Abigail, to their different degrees, I call them, your co-star, maybe a day player, background, people who you never see, right? Yes. If you flip that around now, anything, I show up to every single other person as a servant to them.
Right. You're part of their story.
Yeah. I am part of what God is giving them.
And they are the heroes of that story.
Yes.
They're the star.
Right. So if they have done something, in the past, if something, or even if somebody makes me mad and I snap at them or whatever, I have served them, if they're up for it, to how do I work with it? Because all you can do is work within your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I think giving grace to someone in part is realizing that you're showing up as a servant to them. And you don't know what that is. That's the mystery of the scene that you're playing.
Yeah.
So you might as well go in trying to be the best servant you can for them. I mean, somebody walk into a 7-Eleven and this girl behind the counter is, it's not my job to cheer her up, or it's just to
Right.
be there as a present, fully present me in that moment. So that when she looks up and I see her name tag and I go, "Hey, Mary," and she goes, almost like,
Yes.
"How do you know my name?" And it's like, "Because you have a tag."
That's right.
But it's more than that, because I took the time to go, "Hey, Mary."
You're
And
treating her
she,
as a person, not just a function.
yeah, right. That personhood, it's in some way, it's almost like Mary doesn't become a person until I engage with her as a person. Aha, that's what God has been saying to you.
Mm-hmm.
I show up to you as a person intentionally. God intentionally shows up to Jerry Martin as a person in this encounter.
Mm-hmm.
So if I just walk in and I'm thinking, I got to be here for dinner and and I'll pay for my gas. All right, goodbye. And I didn't have an encounter with Mary.
Right.
I had a transactional experience. Now I'm not going to
Right.
get upset and mad. Oh, you missed an opportunity for me. Maybe it just wasn't. I was
No,
distracted. Okay, that's all
transactional
right.
experiences
Yeah,
are often
okay,
what people want. They
it's
don't
fine.
necessarily want to be engaged. It's just a
Sure.
job, and they're maybe thinking about something else while they do the register. They're
Yeah,
not looking for. So it just depends on the situation and your own urges.
right. But I have realized that when I am intentional about showing up in that present moment and noticing Mary's name tag, and even if she doesn't, well, that's the thing too. I can't have any expectations about how she's
Right.
supposed to respond. Hey,
Right.
Mary, oh goodness, let's have a relationship in this moment. She may be, what?
Right.
But there is a scene being played and we're both present to it. And that's all there is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting.
Well, this has been a great discussion, Jerry. I'm so glad to have it with you. Thanks so much.
Okay, Scott, you be well.
Thank you for listening to God and Autobiography, the podcast. Subscribe for free today wherever you listen to your podcasts and hear a new episode every week. You can hear the complete dramatic adaptation of God and Autobiography as Told to a Philosopher by Jerry L. Martin by beginning with episode 1 of our podcast and listening through its conclusion with episode 44. You can read the original true story in the book from which this podcast is adapted, God and Autobiography as Told to a Philosopher, available now at Amazon.com and always at godandautobiography.com. Pick up your own copy today. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, please email us at questions@godandautobiography.com and experience the world from God's perspective, as it was told to a philosopher. This is Scott Langdon. I'll see you next time.